Welcome, everybody. My name is Christian Berger, President of Berger Consulting Group. Very happy to have everyone on. I recognize a lot of the names from the registration list and delighted you could be here. Joining me today is Amanda Kalcic, Senior Consultant with Berger Consulting. She's up in lovely Toronto. I'm here in Chicago. And we want to use this next hour very efficiently to give you guys an introduction to what's happening in the realm of HR, timekeeping, and payroll. The extent of change that's occurring in that marketplace right now for construction is very it's dynamic. Let's say that. And I think there's a lot of kind of large scale decisions that need to be made. And our hope today was not to give you a single product to look at or a or a list of functions to consider, but more of a high level way to think about your HR and payroll strategy. There's quite a bit of I don't know that I want to call it misinformation, but maybe some direction that's not as clear as it could be. And we wanted to kind of help elevate the dialogue and the level of understanding as you guys set out to evaluate your choices. So with that, and by the way, we're going to have time at the end for questions. Tamana Akram is on the call as well. If you chat her in this meeting, she'll pick up the question and decide whether to ask us in the middle or save it for the end. But we do certainly encourage questions along the way. Just by way of background, I've a lot of folks on the call know who I am. I've been president of Berger Consulting for about 28 years now, and been involved in a lot of ERP strategy, direction, selection, implementation. We do a lot of process improvement work. We also get pulled in frequently around HR payroll opportunities, which Amanda will talk a little bit about. And because we're independent of the software community, we don't get tied to any one product or platform, leaves us a little bit more independent and agnostic. Amanda?
Yeah, so I'm a senior consultant over here at Berger Consulting. I've been in the construction industry for over 20 years and about 8 of the last years with Berger Consulting. I've worked in a range of small, mid-sized firms to large, diverse contractors, across different types of engagement, whether it's solution strategy, assessment, or selections. I've focused a lot on the HR, Timecard, payroll kind of aspect. As in the kind of beginning of my career, I was getting pulled into that direction. Just there was a lot going on in that space, and there was a need for our kind of firm to help out some of the contractors around strategy, around evaluating solutions, and that sort of thing.
So we're oh, go ahead, Amanda.
Oh, I was going to say, so when me and Christian were kind of looking at what topic to kind of come up with this, this time for our webinar, there's not a lot of, I guess, presentations or webinars that sort of cover the payroll, time card, and HR aspect. And, it feels really important to us, especially now with what this disruption that payroll is kind of experiencing. I think construction in general has been going through what I call a disruptive zone, and it feels like there's constant change, and you can really feel it across the industry. And that's not immune here at HR and time cards and payroll. And these functions have been evolving too, and shaped by new strategies, new software, and the realities of the market. As we know, labor shortages, skill gaps, shifting demographics. That's kind of painted the overall picture. And we're hoping you kind of come away with this session, with a few key items, a clear sense of how HR, time card, and payroll has evolved over time, an idea of what the near term and the long term outlooks are looking like. I want to kind of give some guidance around navigating all of this strategically, and provide you with lessons from our experience on what to consider when evaluating software. And then finally, a sense of how AI, machine learning, and data analytics are starting to make an impact in this area.
Very good. And some of you might be wondering why do we have a piece of cheese on the on the slide? And that was a late ad, but I thought appropriate. So for those of you old enough to remember, there used to be a notion in the consulting organization behavior field, who moved my cheese, and which was all really around people not liking change. And if there's a group in most organizations who do not like their cheese moved, it's payroll. So, and we have to. This would be in the category of a spoiler. Your cheese is moving, and the a question of how fast do you react, and how do you organize for that? Where do you look? Those kinds of things. But the notion of payroll and HR kind of remaining where they are is possible, but maybe not even ideal. We also think that, if you look at where we all started, we had a singular ERP platform, whether it was Vista or Sage or CMIC or Penta or whatever. We had an ERP platform, and that ERP platform had payroll in it, and in most cases had some level of HR in it, so fully integrated. And that was where we all started. And you can go back as far as the early 2000s, and that was the condition. Now, fast forward, a lot of that's changing, and that's why we're here. A lot of these ERP platforms, some of the newer ones, don't even have payroll built in. Some of them have either given up or just decided not to pursue HR functionality built in. They've decided that the solutions available in the marketplace to do the HR functions are available, and they should not expend their capital building out applications that are otherwise available in the marketplace. So that singular application with those three capabilities tied in, I think we're going to see that diminishing over time. So that's kind of let's just call that our starting point. So Amanda, HR?
Yeah. Yeah, let's start with HR. And I think in many ways, this is probably one of the first areas, or at least perhaps alongside time collection, that really started to change within the construction industry, probably about, it's 8, maybe 5 years ago, kind of in that span. Those changes were driven by contractors, market demands, and a lot more compliance requirements. If we kind of look back in the day, we often saw a dual role that HR had of doing a little bit of HR and doing their day payroll role. They would come with the onboarding forms, they would get employees enrolled in benefits, they would do the reporting. And, as those administrative demands kind of started to grow, construction companies started separating these roles, and HR kind of became its own department. They started hiring dedicated staff to handle employee needs, creating specialized roles like HR managers, recruiting. Then along came this internal shift. It kind of moved from HR being a reactive kind of approach to one that actively started to support employees and contribute a little bit more strategically to the business. And today, that evolution is really seeing HR move into that strategic HRM role, the business partner. They're going beyond the traditional tasks kind of aspect and more actively supporting the business by focusing on initiatives that drive value, advising leadership, and helping kind of shape the company's future. Now, not every company is there yet, but the more forward-thinking ones are on their way to that kind of department. So.
Yeah, I would say, Amanda, it seems like we saw more HR professionals, members of SHRM, the HR Association, coming into construction, which we never had that before. And they brought with them a set of expectations around technology and automation, large-scale HRIS systems that they had used in prior companies.
Yeah, definitely, Christian. That's a good point and kind of a good segue into the next slide. You had these professionals that came from other industries. They really wanted to, they had the drive to build out more HR activities and processes, and they wanted to implement tools and software that they were using before that they know that could better support them in the HR functions. And So a lot of the natural first steps, as you were mentioning, was, hey, what does our existing ERP have? And it felt like construction ERPs tried to respond, as you said, like Viewpoint started to acquire key styles. It was out in the market, and CMIC put, product enhancements around this area. But the pace of development and the advanced functionalities that HR professionals were looking for was just too slow for them. And so the ERP's option just it didn't measure up for them. And the easy decision for a lot of companies was to look at these third-party solutions. So you can kind of flip to the next slide when you're ready. It looking at the third-party solutions, it was kind of generally fine. There was some data that needed to flow between your ERP and these third parties. But it wasn't overly complex, and I think a lot of contractors were okay with dual maintenance when it was required. Not ideal, but it allowed the HR professionals to get some of that functionality that they really wanted. And we kind of shifted to building out these activities and looking for solutions that had a lot of these applications like onboarding, benefits, performance. And as the HR departments started to mature, they added on different elements, applicant tracking, LMS, kind of continued to grow. One thing that's, kind of important to mention here is the HR solutions that they were looking at, there weren't a lot, probably none maybe, that were really built for construction. Most of them were built to kind of service a lot of the other industries like corporate, tech, finance. I mean, one of the ones that we are really familiar with, Christian, is like we talked about before, is Bamboo HR. I mean, that was a platform, now really serves the construction industry, but that was really developed for a white collar industry, and it felt short on a lot of the construction needs. So same thing with the larger platforms. Everybody likes ADP and Workday, powerful solutions, but they weren't always equipped to meet the unique needs of construction. And I don't know if a lot of companies really had the appetite at the time to make that big investment in those solutions. So,
well, sometimes those systems were the cost would exceed that of their ERP.
Yeah,
And it was
yep.
like it just didn't calculate for a lot of construction firms. The other thing, Amanda, that was kind of fascinating to me that you brought to my attention early on was some of these HR platforms required you to use their payroll. So
Yep.
and a lot some contractors tried that, and it was not a pleasant experience.
No, so there wasn't a ton of solutions out there, and we'll touch a little bit on the payroll, kind of aspect of it, but there wasn't a lot of solutions that really the HR can turn to that allowed them to decouple doing payroll in their solution. So it
Yep.
was a bit of a struggle at the beginning.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, next slide.
Yep. So time collection. Time collection has actually been around for quite a while, at least 20 plus years. But if you remember back in the old days, this was paper timesheets, manual time entry. And then once the time entry got done and there were problems, then somebody in payroll had to call out to the field and ask about a cost code or a job. And is that employee still there? And I mean, all kinds of validation going on, very time consuming. Then we got smart at the time and moved into spreadsheets and other digital approaches. Some people were using like fillable forms. The problem was that none of that was tied into the ERP or the payroll. So there was no validation data. So data was coming in with mistakes up and down. And then somebody in payroll had to clean all that up. Then we got a little smarter still, and we started putting in mobile apps. And I'll just name a couple like work Rumbix, WorkMax, Austin Lane, AL Mobile, just to name a few. And these were generally well received and well regarded. And then, but you also had, I'm going to call it in-app time cards. So another popular one that was unique to heavy and civil was HCSS Heavy Job. I mean, a lot of heavy civil contractors use that for their timekeeping, even though it came out of a estimating solution. B2W has the same thing. So I think that that notion of third-party time tracking it has matured. In fact, you could almost say matured more relative to construction than the payroll applications that followed. Now we're at a point where we have biometric capability, GPS location for geofencing, predictive insights on labor planning. So the evolution of time card processing has moved, maybe not quickly, but it has moved. And I think it's generally in a good place for most construction firms today. And that's good because you really have this notion of labor compliance. You guys have to be in construction, have to be compliant with Department of Labor for breaks, for you have to check and see if anybody was hurt on the job that day. Some owners require OSHA 30 to be on a job site, so you don't, and there's penalties if you're not. So you want to make sure the time card solution is alerting you if somebody's on a job site where they don't have proper training. There's other certifications required. So the compliance aspect has increased greatly. And we're also trying to automate this process so that it's much more efficient and fluid, and we don't have to touch every time card record. And I would say that from my perspective, if you're touching time cards right now, you need to evaluate your process because there's too many. It's too costly to be touching every time card and validating and correcting. That should absolutely be systematic. And the other thing that I would say is you now have the integration with HR systems. So we have to be able to keep up with termination and rehire. Sometimes we have service technicians and their work orders that they do in the field are their timesheets. So that has to tie in as well. One other element you have to think about sometimes is clock in, clock out, because Department of Labor requires you to pay somebody based on their time on the job, time off the job, not necessarily a time card that you've used for costing purposes. So there's just a lot that you have to think about only in the realm of time card itself. And I would say, I don't know if I could say 70% of contractors have moved to systems like this now. The adoption level is very high, to be sure. But I also think with the changes in payroll and the changes in HR, that's causing some of these early strategies to be rethought. And the middle bullet there, I think that one of the things that those of you that are in IT have to give consideration to is what's the level of support you need to provide to handle the integrations. And we're going to talk about the integrations between payroll and HR and timekeeping a little bit later on. But that is absolutely a thing, because as Amanda's going to point out, the vendor community will say, oh yeah, we integrate with this, or we integrate with that, or we have APIs. They're very, pardon me, but a little loose with the language. And the responsibility ends up with the contractor most of the time.
Yeah, would you say, Christian, that a lot of companies we see, use kind of a mix of different time card solutions? They might have people in the field that do crew time, people in the office that are using the ERP. So just how do you support
and
all of
service
these?
people and shop people? Yes. So you really need to think through that time collection strategy carefully.
Yeah.
Okay, payroll, man.
Yeah, from a payroll perspective, I think just up until a few years ago or a couple of years ago, the general consensus among construction companies was that payroll absolutely needed to live inside ERP, and I mean for good reason. Construction ERPs have been developing and perfecting functionality for over 20 years, and it's complex. We're talking about multi-union, multi-location environments with rules based on the location, and it drives the pay rates. Drives the union dues, the pension, plus you add on reciprocity rules around the unions, the states, the localities. You got some prevailing wage, certified payroll reporting. It's complex, and it was handled well, I think, over the years, and ERPs really were responsive to these complexities. And it's not anywhere else in the industry where we face all of these kind of items. So,
yep.
And payroll is highly interdependent on other parts of the ERP, like jobs and work orders. They hold a lot of the key data for what these rates are or what the location is. And, it kind of helping with the accuracy of payroll processing. And I think for labor intense companies, keeping payroll closely tied with ERP was and for some is seen as a critical for calculating and controlling job cost and retaining skilled workers. I'm sure there's a lot of people that say, hey, we need payroll to be in house. We need to be able to service our employees and be there for them, and they need to be paid correctly.
Well, and not only that, but with unions, you had the threat of rather substantial penalties if payroll didn't get processed on a timely basis. And then you also had the frequent condition of layoffs.
Yeah.
And as they frequently say, layoff is payoff. So you couldn't really be waiting around to get this, offsite payroll process. So those were a number of things that kind of kept people wedded to their ERP-based payroll application.
Yeah. And from this perspective, we saw companies that were open to outsourcing payroll. And I kind of want to talk through a little bit of the third party, but we kind of saw two approaches. One is, people that outsource payroll for somebody else to do it for them, like an ADP, handing off the time. A third party would process their payroll, and then it would, come back for them to post. The drawback of this approach was, a lot of the work was happening outside of any company systems. There was workarounds to get job costing. There was workarounds to get rate determination, and handing this off to a third party. And then there was a delay. It took like over a week and a half for labor to come back to the ERP for job costing. So, which really kind of delayed seeing where you were on a project and decision making that needed to happen on site. The other approach that a lot of people, well, I wouldn't say a lot, a few of them wanted to kind of toy with was this hybrid. And a little bit different from the hybrid we see today. I think this hybrid was more utilizing solutions that were on the market, and either the determination for that was they had strong HR components, but required payroll, or they just wanted a better way to pay employees without having to worry about doing the tax remittance and the payment process. So it was this hybrid approach. But in this hybrid approach, there was always a level of dual processing. Often companies that were labor intense needed that job costing to be real time. So they were processing payroll in their ERP, and they were processing it in a third party, or they were processing a component in the ERP to get job costing rate determination and handing off to a third party, being you still are doing the work, or you were using a third party to pay your employees from a gross to net perspective. So I think that's kind of traditional, and it wasn't a lot of contractors, but we did see that traditionally for the people that wanted to use a third party.
Well, and Amanda, didn't we see some confusion early on between when you mentioned third-party payroll, the everybody's mind traveled immediately to, oh, that's ADP, and I lose control of my payroll, somebody else is doing it. When in
Yeah.
fact, what you're describing in the second scenario there is actually a best in class payroll application, but you own it and you use it. You can run payroll 5 times a day if you need to. Like, it's under your control, whereas the payroll service is the outsource scenario.
Yeah. Yeah. Correct. Yeah, for sure. So, looking at both the history and today, it felt like what's happening in the market, there was three big driving forces of this disruption. First, contractors themselves, they, as we kind of talked about in HR, they wanted more flexibility, better technology. They wanted ways to reduce like time consuming work, like payroll processing while staying compliant. They're already seeing AI being used in things like chat boxes, scanning payroll for anomalies, and interpreting unions agreements. So they're really wanting to go after that new technology. And second, we saw it from the ERP vendors. And I think, Christian, you hit on a little bit of this. The ERP vendors are moving away from providing a native payroll application. They want to de-risk themselves. They want to focus on some of that core functionality, which differentiates them from the market of other ERPs. And they want to reduce the effort and the support costs that come with supporting a payroll application. And I think a
Indeed.
lot, yeah. And the other one is third-party solutions. I think they saw an untapped market. I think that they saw that there's an opportunity here. People were looking for solutions, and the market is just booming. We see new solutions enter the market almost daily. And we see a lot of the existing platforms adapting for construction. We've got UKG, Bamboo HR, with Acoro, and we have new emergents like Miter, Lumber. I think it's just going to keep coming.
Yes. Yeah. And would you say, Amanda, that maybe some of the people that stepped into third-party payroll might have been a tad naive when it came to the complexities of union reciprocity, job rate determination, certified Davis-Bacon?
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah,
lot there.
absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
So where does that lead us then? I think is this marketplace, and almost every engagement we're involved in these days seems to have an element of what do we do with payroll? And I mean, there was a time when some of the emerging um, ERP solutions, the cloud-based ERP solutions, didn't even have payroll. They were like, nope, we don't have it. And you're like, well, how do people get paid? And they were like, well, you have a third-party payroll solution, and they frequently had integrations built to some of these third-party payroll systems like Criterion or Lumber or Miter. Um, but it really threw people off. Like, how can you not have a payroll? Like, we've lived with that so long that we're like that. Just it was like air we breathe. So I think there's confusion, a little bit of uncertainty out there. Certainly, there's risk out there that we need to be mindful of. But I think there's also an element of excitement. Like maybe there's a better way to execute on payroll these days.
And would you say,
So
Christian, kind of going back, I think that's even on the vendor side too, right? There is a level of confusion. We've been through many software demonstrations where we're asking, well, where is this happening? And it probably took a couple of kicks of the can to really explain where some of these functions are happening and where data is moving between the three systems
yeah,
or two
yep.
systems.
Absolutely. In fact, I would say that once some of the ERP, we have one in particular who didn't have a payroll, and they were fine with that because most of their clients would use third party anyway. And when they came into construction, they were like, well, we can't rely on third party payroll alone. So they built a job rate engine inside their application. It's not a full on payroll, but it's a small application that does the job rate determination and the union sort of rules from Timecard, processes that against jobs, and then passes it off to payroll to actually gross to net, run the checks, et cetera. So, what are some of the significant trends that we're seeing that probably require you to have a more cohesive strategy? Certainly, much more greater interest in labor productivity from the self-performed contractors, mechanical, electrical, interior, heavy civil. Those guys are all very focused on labor production and productivity. So that probably the best place for that is through the time card solution. And solutions like Heavy Job and Rumbix and Austin AL Mobile, they've been doing that for a long time. So you enter your time along with your units every day or every week, and the field actually gets immediate feedback on how well they performed that day or that week. We all know and have continued to hear about the shortage of skilled labor. That's going to continue on. So we have to have ways of both attracting, hiring, onboarding, and retaining, the best people. And that's a combination of HR as well as just culture and things of that nature. Um, uh, Employee retention and development, key. Uh, Growing employee expectations. 20 years ago, nobody cared about self-service. That was barely a thing. And then all of a sudden, you gave them access to their pay stubs and their W-2s online. They were like, this is great. Can we have more? Then you put benefits up there. Then you put training and development up there. Then you put performance review up there. And so now an employee coming in kind of expects to have a portal with all this HR payroll related data and information available. There's absolutely a heightened focus on data security, not exposing PII information. compliance with GDPR and other privacy compliance items. Companies want to leverage machine learning and AI more. Boy, I can remember in the old days just how grueling payroll processing was. And it was a lot of the same data. I was with a company only last week, and we were talking about how we needed to put, I can't remember exactly, but some labor activity data in based on the work that was being done. And they were convinced that that had to be a person. And I asked the question why that couldn't be an agent or a bot or something. And they're like, well, I guess it could be. So the minds are opening around putting agents, agentic AI, into these applications to smooth out some of this repetitive kind of non-value add work. Certainly having a single database with employee data, performance data, development data, job data, all of that is very important. And I think the approach that we're starting to see is getting all of that HR payroll data fed into a data warehouse makes it much more available. Um, so just a few of the trends we're seeing on the outside. And I think the vendor community is seeing this as well, and they're starting to build out their products. For another one is labor planning. Almost every company we work with now is keen on labor planning. Do I have enough welders? Do I have enough pipe fitters? Do I have enough journeymen? Do I have enough supervision for the jobs, not only the jobs we have under contract, but the jobs we have coming? So that labor planning aspect is another big one. So where is that leading us to? So that was a bit of a kind of look back to today, but now where are we headed?
Yeah. So looking ahead, I think in the HR space, we're going to continue to see the adoption of third-party solutions, and like we said, continue to see more competition in the market as new players enter the space. I think there'll be a bigger focus on better integration, and a lot of companies will look to middleware solutions to kind of have that tight integration and share data across the platforms and determine what the source of truth is. And then, like you said, Christian, I think they're going to start to layer on, even BI tools to start to analyze the data, build out KPIs and dashboards.
Indeed, indeed. Well, and I think this is maybe the first time, Amanda, that we've put middleware into the equation
Hmm.
or in a slide. And I think that is going to be more important going forward, not just because of payroll and HR and Timecard, but because of a myriad of other third-party solutions that um, are required to tie back to ERP or other systems. So
Yeah.
stand by for more on that as we go along. Okay. Um,
And so if you flip to the next slide, we kind of talk a little bit about the long-term outlook here. I think, we continue to see more HR professionals entering the construction industry, and they continue to evolve into strategic business partners with the organization. At the same time, technology and shifting workforce models, we're likely to see actually HR departments kind of shrink a little bit and become more agile. And finally, like I was just mentioning before, there's going to be a stronger desire among more contractors for analytics and data, being able to use this to support decision making, identify trends, and continue to drive business outcomes.
Indeed. So what's the outlook, excuse me, for the time card? Well, I would say the legacy time card solutions that have been around for 10, 20 years are improving their tech stacks. The ones that are developing out now are probably already on modern tech stacks, but some of the older ones need to improve that, including more robust APIs. The APIs are just small programs that help one package exchange data with another package. Um, Now, interestingly, though, I would say that you're seeing a drive toward more functionality in the time card solution. So not just time, but units of production, sometimes even safety data, like where you hurt on the job. And sometimes these time cards need to go into a document repository so they can support T&M substantiated billing. I'm seeing some time card solutions uh, have the ability to produce a foreman daily report. So I think the goal here that I hear from a lot of contractors is we don't want to have too many apps in the field. So do we have a time card app that does foreman daily? Or do we have a project management system, take Procore as an example, that does foreman daily reports, but can also do timesheets? So I think that that's an interesting dynamic there. There is going to be a tie-in with compliance. We're seeing both owner compliance, DOT, DOT and Department of Labor compliance be more and more important. And so the time card system could actually have a role in ensuring that compliance is being met. And then I put down there gamification. I actually could see a situation where competitions start up around production rates and productivity in the field, and trying to push the field to have better, more efficient productivity or greater productivity. So I could see that entering in a little bit as well. So this time card solution question really comes down to, will it be in a system like a estimating system a la B2W or HCSS? Will it be standalone like Austin Lane or my WorkMax, Rumbix, or will it be payroll based like a Workforce Go or one of those kind of systems? So I think that question of where does it live is kind of key.
Yeah, from looking at the payroll in the near future, I think just this disruption is relatively new. So I think we're still going to see a mix of strategies. We're going to have the traditionalist who's just not ready to move away and wants to keep it in the ERP. And there's going to be ERPs that are going to continue to build it out. For example, like somebody like Coins, they have a strong payroll, and I think they're going to continue to kind of build out that payroll. You have some companies that are going to continue to be the adopters, wanting a third party, but doing still some of the processing within their ERPs, and being comfortable with handling payroll from a gross to payment process in another solution. And then you're going to have these embracers, which are looking, to the future and seeing like, hey, we can have these two solutions. We don't need to do dual. We want them to be well integrated and feed data across the system and have it as a seamless process. And I think over the long term, if you kind of switch to the next slide, Christian. Sorry, do you want to? Yeah. In the long term, I think I expect to see a lot of people shift away from the ERP-based payroll. I think contractors are just going to become more comfortable with best-in-class, purpose-built solutions. I think the competition is going to continue to intensify, and more players, like I was saying, are going to enter this space. And I think that a lot of contractors are going to put pressure on these third parties to really diversify themselves and create, hey, why use your solution? What's in it for them? What kind of gives it the value and justify their adoption? So kind of see that as the long-term shift.
Yeah. So the one question that kind of comes to mind, Amanda, is, how is that possible now when it wasn't then? And I think that in some ways,
Sure.
when you only work with a payroll application, there's a lot less complexity and a lot less competition for development resources. So a company like a MITRE or a Lumber or Criterion can actually concentrate on nothing but construction payroll. And that means things will move quicker. I also think that we've probably seen a skip of at least one or two development platforms generations, which means that they're actually more agile, more quick to develop. So I think that that's probably aided their ability to bring products into the market. I think that my opinion would be that anybody that brings payroll into construction from outside without 2, 3, 4 years of experience will be unpleasantly surprised by the complexity. But the products that have come into this market and intended to stay here and do nothing but construction, I think the likelihood of their success is pretty good.
Yeah, and yeah, I failed to mention that, but it's true. Like the players that are in this market now have come with the functionality to meet some of those construction complexities and have worked with the ERP to kind of build out what that looks like, where a function's happening. So there's definitely different players in the payroll space from what we've seen even 5 years ago.
Am I doing that one, Amanda?
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
So, strategic approach. We in the past, firms would rush out and buy a time card solution. Then they would leave their payroll in the ERP, and then they would go out and get an HR solution. And then maybe they would change off that HR solution and then think about something else. And it was very piecemeal. And we're at the point where you really can't do that. It shouldn't do that anymore. You really should think about payroll, time card, HR as a single work stream, and then optimize that with one, two, or three solutions that are, tightly integrated back to ERP. So that really requires a bit of a 3-year vision. And that vision is going to come from people in HR, people in management, people in um, payroll, and even in the field as it relates to time card. So we feel that the best approach is that 3-year kind of vision or roadmap, and then you can start your journey on finding solutions that fit that model. Um, I also think it's very important to really sit down and identify some of the issues you're having with payroll and time card in particular. And here's why I say that, because some of the issues you're having probably are process related, compliant, like just people doing what they're supposed to do. And new technology is not going to make that problem go away. For example, some people, maybe not on this call, but they'll have people start work on job sites that haven't even been onboarded. And so payroll has no knowledge of that worker, and they they they're all of a sudden time cards are coming in. Like that behavior does not get fixed by technology. That behavior gets fixed by accountability and process conformance. So I think it's important to look at what are the key challenges. Some of it will be solved with technology, thankfully, but there's still a degree of um, process adherence that you have to account for. I'd also say that this is too big of a elephant to eat at one time. So prioritizing the goals. Is HR a more significant goal in solving for their needs than say payroll or than time card? And try to best you can try to prioritize those uh, activities. And then you begin your platform evaluations rather than rushing out and getting something new.
Yeah. And so when you're kind of entering the market and at the point of looking at software, we just kind of wanted to share some of our, experiences and highlight some, 4 key considerations we feel are important, for you guys to understand within these solutions. And really it's around, really understanding the functional system responsibilities. We talked a little bit about this earlier, just where functions happening. And, we'll see sometimes vendors put up these diagrams of, hey, job cost goes this way with arrows into the payroll and rate determination goes this way into, ERP. And I think you got to take it down to that next level. And we'll talk through it a little bit more of, where are these activities happening and where is this data flowing? And more of a clear definition of the integration requirements and ownership and support. Once you start adding solutions, where's the ownership? And then contractual partnerships. And we'll talk more about things to look at, but what happens if a partner walks away? So kind of diving into a few of these topics.
Well, and Amanda, I mean, we've been on a number of jobs where once you start asking these hard questions, the sales people that are involved in the deal start to get a little squirmish around, well, that's not exactly what we meant, or
Yeah.
we're not, that really would fall to the responsibility of the contractor. And I think the point up here that I really like is upgrades. So let's say you've got a payroll system with time card, you got an HR system, you got ERP, and those are all magically harmonized. Well, then somebody upgrades the product. Well, all of a sudden that upgrade broke one of the integrations. Well, now that's got to get fixed. Did it get fixed can it get fixed in a test environment? Or are you actually working in production and those upgrades are happening to your production environment? I mean, those are some pretty hard questions that really should be evaluated carefully in this journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so what does your overall human capital platform look like? We haven't talked a lot about LMS, learning management systems. Some of the higher end HR platforms have LMS built in. Some companies are using third-party solutions like a Cornerstone or some of those. And there are benefits to having the LMS built in, but it adds cost and complexity sometimes that contractors don't want to bear. The payroll, the time card we talked about, production and productivity. Safety is another one. Like the safety systems that are out there need that payroll data also to be able to track who's on the job and what have you. So then with middleware, you're actually able to use middleware to connect all of these different solutions and ultimately to feed the data mart. So this is again very high level, but if you as a contractor can develop this sort of framework and vision, then you've got the basis to then move forward and start thinking about specific solutions and the underlying technologies. And just to take it one step down, and why we're kind of keen on this topic. So imagine you've got HR, you've got payroll, you've got ERP, and you've got time card. Well, and I really, in developing this diagram, I mean, I only have a few of the actual lines in place. If I actually put all the lines in place, it would be a messy spaghetti diagram. But the payroll system kicks out the auto vouchering of payroll liabilities. That's got to go to the ERP platform. The rate determination needs to happen in conjunction with job costs because each job can have its own rate. If payroll stand alone, it really usually doesn't have that kind of rate determination unless it's construction specific. The job charging of the labor is something that will absolutely happen in job cost and needs to be timely, really shouldn't be waiting for a week after the payroll is processed. Termination and rehire, that's very common in our industry. And a terminated employee should be terminated across the board, terminated in HR, terminated in payroll, terminated in time card, kind of all at the same time. And partly because the benefits admin aspect of that is somebody going to stay on COBRA. We don't want to terminate somebody, have them terminate benefits when in fact they could have been eligible for COBRA. So again, you're seeing the complexity of this interplay between the systems. And then, I mean, typically in your ERP job cost, you guys are adding new jobs, new cost codes all the time for change orders or whatever. So those codes need to be available to the payroll platform and the time card platform to validate the data. Now, one of the concepts that we like to use sometimes when we're evaluating a large scale solution is something called a proof of concept. So we want to basically ask a vendor to take a set of data and a script and actually run through an entire process day in the life to show how a certain process would work to validate. And this could take 4 hours, 8 hours. It could take whatever amount of time it needs to really validate that it works as promised.
Yeah.
So the integration aspect is just something we want to make sure everybody fully understands. Man?
Yeah, and I think we touched on these pretty well here, Christian. It's really just, hey, ownership of support and upgrades, and like you said, really understanding who owns it, who's going to support it, how it's going to be supported and tested, where it's going to be tested, just making sure you're really clear on each vendor's responsibility to maintain it, and what's the process. I think these are all important things that you really need to understand from a contractual obligation as you're buying multiple different softwares.
Yeah. Well, in particular, we're always a proponent of making sure that you have a test environment. Not all software companies provide a test environment as part of their standard offering, particularly in this new cloud SaaS environment. And what we've had some clients who come to us and they don't have a test environment. So now upgrades are being done in the production environment, and you have no way to test what the impact is on other systems.
Yep. And the last one is vendor partnership. We talked about the different solutions, but also knowing, hey, what's each vendor's obligation, and what happens when the partnership dissolves. They say, hey, they're responsible for this aspect. Well, if a partnership dissolves, how does that work? Where are you left? What's their responsibility? What's the exit plan? What's the impact? I think these are important questions to ask and understand as you're going into to purchase software and evaluate
Indeed.
it.
Yep. So what's happening from a technology standpoint? A lot of the larger software companies are promoting the addition of AI, machine learning, agentic AI into their solutions. Some have some actual valid tested capabilities. Some are just kind of talking about roadmap, but they're not there yet. This is not a simple couple of screens to add to a product. This is hardcore. But there's tremendous amount of capability that these vendors are adding in this area, and I think the traditional um, in in solution ERP payrolls aren't really going to do that. I mean, they might try, but they're going to be less aggressive because they're applying AI in other aspects of the product. So I'm really looking for the third-party payroll solutions to and time card solutions too, and HR to lead the charge in terms of how AI is being applied, um, and really will help in time card cleaning up time cards, validating, detecting fraud sooner, um, the reading documents like labor agreements, for example. Make sure you're in conformance with all your labor agreements. So we're very optimistic about where that's all headed.
And Christian, would you say that these are probably going to be um, functions or features that are really going to differentiate products in the market? I think people are going to go after products that are building this out and have these capabilities in it, and continue to kind of push forward on, putting more AI and stuff, driving more automation with
Oh,
machine learning.
absolutely. We were with one company not that long ago, and a software vendor that was payroll demonstrated some AI capability around labor agreements, and the client the client was suitably impressed and thought that's almost a day a week of time that they spend doing that particular function. So I think they're going to start to see some pretty dramatic opportunities in that realm and make that payroll function all the more um, powerful. And too, the other advantage here is that if you're really driving for payroll and HR improvements, but the company is kind of stuck on the ERP that they're on and they don't want to move. I mean, this is a way to leave the ERP in place, but move the payroll and HR functionality out to a modern platform and just tie it back.
Yeah.
So we wanted to leave some time for questions. So any questions you have, feel free to type them in the Q&A button there, and Tamana's going to read those out. Tamana, anything you want to?
Yes, so we have one question from Keith Andrews. Keith asks, who do you feel are the leaders, strong players today for construction payroll? Same for middleware platforms?
Well, okay, good question. Of the ones that we've looked at, I would say certainly Boomi has the most traction in construction for middleware. It is not the most powerful, but it is a mid-market solution that's affordable. And we know several partners that specialize in Boomi and have good, strong knowledge of Procore and Textura and all those kinds of solutions. We do see some companies using MuleSoft, And then there's a couple of others out there, but I would say MuleSoft and Boomi are the two that we probably see the most frequently. As far as what was the other part of the question, Tamana? Was it
Is it the
payroll?
same for middleware platforms?
Yeah, the payroll though is I would say that miter and lumber have come on the scene quickly and seem to be proving out pretty well. Another one that we looked at not too long ago was Criterion. Liked what we saw there, and they had the benefit of mature. Well, they had a couple of benefits. They handled Canadian payroll. They had a built-in HR platform, and they handled complex union payroll. So that was all to the positive. I would say we also got a look not too long ago on a project at Workforce Go, and that seemed to be a little lighter weight payroll type of solution. Amanda, am I missing anybody?
I would probably, it's worth mentioning UKG. I think that they've been a player in the market for a long time, more of a more sophisticated platform, perhaps.
And comes with full, like that was an HR platform that had payroll added in. So that's going to be the most robust HR that you would consider. So other questions?
Yes, we have one other question from Eric Garcia. Eric asks, Christian, are you aware of middleware that would bring rate determination and time entry to Vista job cost?
Well, okay, yes. I would say that is precisely what Boomi has the capability to do. The rate determination, it really depends a lot on um, see, that's an interesting question because Vista has the rate determination in it. So time cards would come over from any of those time card solutions that we mentioned. It would feed into Vista. Vista would actually do the rate determination, do the job charging, and then hand off to a payroll system to actually, do gross to net. So the key thing in that is time card to ERP, rate determination, job charging, hand off to payroll. Maybe one more question there, Tamana?
Yeah, we have time for one more question. So why is this not just a payroll or HR solution strategy? Are there expectations outside of those departments?
Oh, good question. So, yes, this is probably the thing Amanda and I maybe, no, I wouldn't say struggle with, but are attentive to all the time. Too many people will go out and they'll buy a big HR platform like a UKG or something and thinking that this is a departmental solution. And it absolutely is not. It is an organizational, it's an enterprise solution. When you think about it, HR is not going to perform all the performance reviews, development plans, the 360s. That's going to be done by management. And if you're not going to go down, if management is not committed to defining roles, defining development criteria, developing training criteria, if they're not going to be engaged in that way around doing performance reviews, then it really would be a departmental solution. And then you should dial it back to something that's maybe appropriately sized as a departmental solution rather than something that's so otherwise comprehensive. So
I think we're at time.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. It was great having everybody on the call. It was nice to see so many familiar faces. Hopefully, you took a couple of good ideas from this program. And if you have any follow-up questions for Amanda or me, don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of the day.
Yeah, thanks, everyone.